Good afternoon, all.
Hi, good afternoon.
Hi, Eric. No, you've been here.
Hi, Jen. Hi, Stan and Eric.
Hello.
There's others here. You just can't see them from the angle.
That's fine. See some of the important people.
Really, the important people you can't see.
Well, I understand.
Well, hello there.
Excellent. Yes. Thank you.
Go big enough?
So the first one is, well, with this, we don't have to worry about, with the minutes, we don't have to worry about monthly financial report, quarterly
That's right.
update, fiscal year 2022 budget, FAC meeting.
Yep.
Meeting dates.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you.
And adjourn. Chair Cole, adjourn.
And adjourn. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
All right, we need to start it.
Wait. Ryan, whatever, wave your hand, we.
Yes, we're good.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's Finance and Appropriations Committee meeting. Today is going to be a little different because we don't have a quorum. We're going to operate today as a subcommittee. All right, so that's why we gave out the notice about a different location, and we're also convening this for everyone's comfort on Zoom. So thank you for joining us today. We have a fairly comprehensive but clear agenda working for us today. We're going to get some good updates. We're going to forego the convening of the minutes or the accounting for minutes, and we're also going to forego the actual count for quorum. So what we'll do is just get started and go right into the monthly financial report. Mr. Treasurer, and forgive me, I don't have my glasses today, so if I seem a little stumbly and a little off, it's because I just am having some trouble seeing. All right.
Okay, thank you. And this is the financial report for November. So I think it will be. There we go. Revenues year to date are about 31 million above plan. They ran just under 5 million over plan this month. Expenditures at 27.8 million below plan year to date. This month they were about 1.1 million under plan. So on a year-to-date basis, we're about 7% to the good on revenues, and I guess 7% to the good on expenditures. It takes our cash balance almost $59 million higher than we had in the plan at 350.6 million at the end of November. Looking at revenues, some of the major lines, no changes in property taxes. We expect the dances to begin in January. So we'll get, we'll see more of that next month. But when we take, as in the past, I look at property taxes and that property tax allocation for the state, put those two together, and we're within 1.5 million on plan. So we're very close there. State aid, about 600,000 above plan this month. Year to date, we're running about 12% above plan. Million above plan. I will note this too. I should have mentioned this just a minute ago. We've implemented the November forecast as our basis for the plan. There have been some minor changes, really, and I note that mainly in footnotes in the report that I've made available, the written report, the financial report. So now we are above plan on state aid, as I mentioned. So remember, our plan now includes a $15 million reduction for the transportation penalty. And I'll wait to mention the next step here in a minute, but let's go on to other revenues. We did finally receive one of our subsidy payments for the Q-Scooby. We're expecting, I think, about 3 more this year. It's so small that it barely shows up on the graph, but we are expecting the rest of those to come in this year. In the other revenues bar, that large variance there, almost $27 million above plan. It was very close on plan this month at about 839,000 over plan, but that's made up primarily of pilots. They're running about 8.5 million above plan. The Medicaid reimbursement, which came in, we're getting a catch up from the previous year, that's coming in, a little bit sooner. And then investment income to our good fortune is running about 2.2 million above plan. Other financing sources, we were 2.9 million above plan this year because we posted the transfer for debt service. We expected that in the previous month, but that's just an internal, when do we choose to post it? So that was just timing. Year to date, that line's just 2.6 million below plan, and that all has to do with advance activity. This is a breakdown of the other revenues for you a little bit better. Interestingly enough, the 2 big lines, the pilots line, the third line from the top, that 18.5 million year to date. That's really a one-time occurrence because, as you recall, back in July and August, there was a rush to get those agreements for board revision type issues and settling on property values and the taxes related to that. Get those settlements in place before the new law kicked in that prevents those. So that 18.5 is somewhat of a misnomer. And then the other one is, as I said, the fourth line down, that Medicaid reimbursement and indirect cost. That's just kind of a one-time issue when we get the money that's delayed from the previous year. So the 26 million, while it looks great, a lot of that is just one time.
That's a banner high though, the pilots, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, it's huge. It's huge, because when I took pilots out, I took out about 12 million a year out of the forecast. So this was huge.
Yeah.
I mean, we received almost 25 million. So
I raised that, I illuminated that just for the sake of folks watching, and maybe even some folks who may be legislators watching, understanding the value, the nominal value of what that is, off a taxpayer, by the way, off a regular Joe and Jim taxpayer to a school district, what benefit that actually is. So if someone's watching who's in the legislature, please, let's rethink that law we just passed.
and we're thinking about that, right?
Yes.
We're thinking about legal action relative to that. That's pending legal action, so we're not going to talk about it.
Yes.
On the expenditure side, expenditures are now year to date about 27.8 million below plans. As I noted in the onset, personnel contributes most of that, 21.6. I'll show you a graph here in a minute. I think some of that is due to how we constructed the plan. We'll front and load it. The other has to do with pushing some of that over to the ESSER fund. But I'll talk a little bit more about personal expenditures in a minute. On the non-personnel side, 6.2 million below plan. And that's broken down into supplies, purchase services, and transfers out, making up that variance. Just looking at personnel, this is the behavior of personnel. Last year, our plan, and then the current year. You'll see in the front end for July and August that we're above last year a shade, but we're significantly below plan. I think that's because we front end loaded the plan. So that's just plan design. We match up flow wise, we knew when the 3-month plan would be, but still below plan. So my expectation is that if we front end loaded it and we're below plan, that we should be much closer to plan or over plan in the ensuing months. And so you can see for both October and November, we're much closer to the blue line, still running a bit under plan, but much closer to it. Behaving similarly to last year, you can see later on that the prepaid month was moved on us as well. One of the things I am, those who concerned about a little bit is looking at personnel expenditures on a, compared to prior year. Personnel expenditures are barely, I mean, they're essentially identical through November as they were last year. So we're looking into that to see, is it vacancies? Is it the shifting of costs over the ESSER fund? To have literally no difference year to date through November, the first 5 months of the fiscal year is a unique position to be in. So we'll take a close look at that. Primarily, it's going to change later on in the year, or more importantly, if something's going to change in this fiscal year, that could cause a problem.
Quick question to that.
Mhm.
Does it not, I mean, it seems like the anomaly would really be the ESSER. Wouldn't it be tied more to the idea that we've deferred so much of our costs to that, and that we're going to see the impact and effects of that next year? In a couple of weeks.
I don't know how many positions we've moved from general fund over to ESSER, you know, off the top of your head. So that, like I said, that's something that we would look at. That would be a more significant issue than vacancy, because in the 5-year forecast, I haven't put positions back in yet. So that, you're right, that would be a significant issue. This is the non-personnel graph, showing the below plan on most of the categories. Other uses has to do with transfers out, most notably, that's the capital budget transfer that we executed. Just comparing this year, last year, total revenues and expenditures, the graph on the left just shows you that we're building a cash balance thus far more than we did last year at this time. And then the right-hand graph, which compares revenues and expenditures to one another year over year. The revenue bar for 23 is much larger than the one for 22, primarily because of the 26 million in pilots. So we've got a pretty good idea. You know, we know where the variances are. We know what some of the issues are that can present risks. And it's interesting, you know, when I do the 5-year forecast, to tell you that this stuff changes every day, and the forecast is barely good the day I finish it. So we did the 5-year forecast, and one of the items in there, one of the assumptions, because we wanted to make 26 projected to be positive, was 35 million in reductions, which we plugged into non-personnel. Admittedly arbitrarily, we plugged it into non-personnel lines. So the budget team, Terry and Kristen and others, set about going and saying we got to look at 30% reduction. And after we revived some people at that meeting, because 30% is rather draconian, we just said, look, we have to go through this process. We have to look at budgets and say, if we were to reduce 30%. What would we have to stop doing? And I mean, the initial reaction was, well, we can't do that. And you might say, well, you know, we know you can't do that. But if you had to, what would it look like? So at least we could tell the story. But it changed. And I said, as we get into the spring and the state budget, that might help us out. We're looking at some favorable variances here that could help us out. There are some what I call relief valves along the way with the passage of time. So interestingly enough, yesterday afternoon, I think it was, I got an email that said there was some pending legislation that will continue to phase it. And that happens for DPIA funding. And so we ran numbers this morning, and that means that, well, we could see $11 million more than our state aid. Remember, we forecasted state aid to go down because of enrollment. But also understand that we've changed transportation, not the January one, but during this school year. Earlier, we changed transportation and they spread the special ed students out. Well, then that made all those buses ineligible for special ed reimbursement. So we lost 3.6 million in revenue. So you get plus 11 minus 3.6. You're up about 7. I mean, it's a very fluid process here, especially at this time of year when we're heading into budget season. So the point of it is, we took that snapshot. We've got to come up with kind of a planned response. And then whether or not we execute it in part or in whole or at all will depend upon what the picture is when we get down into March and April, and we're looking at the next forecast and then just have better information. So it's an uncomfortable process. I understand that. It's really uncomfortable. I hope nobody thinks that it's futile, that why are we going through this and we really don't have to do it. But I think that there's always value in taking a hard look at our budgets and having everybody understand and report back. If this were to go through, this is what would happen. And it's just always good to know that. You don't take for granted that we just continue to do what we did last year, this year, and that there aren't some consequences to that. So, all in all, no surprises in the monthly financial report as of yet. We're in the middle of budget season. Things are very fluid. Hopefully we get more positive news out of the State House. And I think that's it for a kind of a financial update for us.
I appreciate that, Mr. Treasurer. Are there any questions at this point? Awesome. I just want to highlight another thing particularly. The implication, what you just shared, mean some important critical things on the superintendent's administrative side. We actually have to know, and I think it's time to really start thinking about how we coordinate those conversations. But we really have to start knowing at a very particular time of year what our academic priorities are, ideally what those costs per students are. We have to start calculating and really developing what our driving assumptions are going to be so that moving forward, there's no lack of clarity whatsoever about where priorities are and then where spending will be directed. Mr. Brown, does it look like you want to say something?
No, thank you.
Okay. I'm sorry, that thing behind you looks like a hand raised or something, but that's just.
Oh, really? Okay, it's a painting behind me,
But I just really, I want to, as much as I'm saying this here with you all present, I think it's super important that the administration understands that now it's really time to start thinking a little differently about how we prioritize what we're driving towards academically, and even with what you mentioned about transportation, what those impacts are as well. Does it make sense to start doing transportation, performing operationally a certain type of way, so that we maximize the benefit and don't lose a benefit at the same time? So thank you for that. Moving on, we will go to the quarterly updates for Esther. Dr. Mosier. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Yeah, on the other side, yes.
Shall we go on the other side?
Yeah. Well, there you go. There you go.
Transparency.
Okay.
Lean to the left.
Could you give me share? Thanks. Okay. Goodness, I feel like drum roll now. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share the quarterly update on ESSER. Actually have some big updates. The first one being that we closed out ESSER 1. ESSER 1 ended September 30th, and we have collaborated to produce all of the necessary documents. And so as we move across this timeline, you'll see that ESSER 1, those dollars have ended. You will be happy to know that we extended all of them. And I'll tell you a little bit about how we use those dollars in a moment. We are well into our use of ESSER 2 and actually expect to wrap up ESSER 2 and fund our going forward activities just out of ARPS or what we sometimes call ESSER 3. We have those dollars available until September 30th of 2024. And just the call out that with ESSER, ARP ESSER, we are making sure that we're attending to that 20%. We will go well over 20% in terms of our activities to address learning recovery, but we have closed out one. So on the screen, you will see a high level chart that gives information about how we used ESSER 1. You'll remember that those were the dollars that came into the district initially, a large number of items that were specific to getting Chromebooks out to students. You see that in that first expenditure listed. Those were any of the materials that we needed to provide to ensure that low-income students had the materials and resources that they needed to participate in education. Second highest expense were those that were connected to our summer learning and extended after school activities, again, to address make sure that we were addressing learning recovery. And then that category at the bottom is essentially a collection of other initiatives, but we did close out ESSER 1. For those who are listening, if you go into board docs and click onto the attachments, you'll see additional detail about those activities. Just a couple of other notes related to ESSER 1. We started from the very beginning collecting impact reports on our expenditures. And so just wanted to highlight a couple of those from ESSER 1. Certainly when schools were initially closed, taking care of the nutritional needs of students was key. Our food service team created meal kits and made sure that students had those supplies that they needed. In the middle, you see a couple of photos around an academic strategy. Our OTs and PTs, along with adapted phys ed, actually took the summer experience to the homes of students who could not come into school to participate, sometimes due to medical issues or other items, and certainly had a great impact on the students who participated there. And down at the bottom, you can read even more about that impact in the link that you see at the bottom. In addition to these activities, just a reminder that we are currently funding a full-time school counselor in every school, supplemented by ESSER. That was not a service that was within our budget prior to the pandemic. So that school's full-time counselor in every building. In addition, we are providing science of reading through a professional development called Letters for every elementary teacher. That's a 2-year professional development project. Large investment, but it really is the blue ribbon professional development to ensure that our elementary teachers have the very most up-to-date pedagogy when it comes to meeting the needs of learners. We have a training and development team now that provides training, not just for our teachers, but also for classified staff. And they are getting some really tremendous participation from classified employees. Chromebooks, we're moving towards a 1-to-1, and certainly our partners in the technology team are working with the company to make sure that we have an adequate inventory of those devices and that we are tracking them properly. but we're moving towards one-to-one. We also addressed HVAC in 13 schools last summer. And you will see in our budget plan, the plan to address air conditioning in the additional schools, school sites that had not yet been updated with HVAC updates. In addition to that, they plan to go back into some of the schools that maybe had an initial HVAC project several years ago. But sometimes there were some spaces within the building that the HVAC needs attention. And so that work will be taking place within the next 18 months, funded by ESSER. We also have in our online academy, started off as blended and have had a couple of different program changes in the last 2 years. But that online academy started off funded exclusively on ESSER. We have made some shifts so that there's general fund support for that program as well. We have added more custodians in schools to certainly address mitigation strategies. But that additional custodial support had not been in the budget prior to ESSER. Certainly, we have worked on addressing our chronic absenteeism. We have a director of attendance, and you frequently hear updates about what's happening to address chronic absenteeism. We have a brand new partnership with ERS to help us address the need for an equitable staffing model in alignment with your goals and guardrails. And the initial work there will be funded on using ESSER as well. These categories are the same. These are the categories that the federal government will require us on an ongoing basis to report within. So we provide periodic updates for the percentage of funds that go towards each of these 4 categories. In addition to that, the state has a number of areas of interest that they asked us to look at and address. And so we certainly are keeping on top of that. The ARC ESSER funds include a requirement that the district have a way to collect community input on an ongoing basis as to our plan. And so our website does contain this link, and it is monitored on a regular basis to make sure that the community input aligns with our plan, or that we have messaging around the priorities that you spoke of within our plan. In addition to that, I would just call out for this quarter, about a week ago, the federal government provided updated guidance. And so I certainly encourage this team to take a look at that. They've done a nice job of organizing a table of contents at the beginning and spelling out within each category where there was a change. But special call out in that document is some additional clarification guidance on construction topics. So we are looking very carefully at that. And I'm going to mention that again in just a couple of minutes. But the best way for our district and community to keep updated on what's happening with ESSER is to look at our ESSER funds homepage that sits on the district webpage. I will mention that the communications team is in the process of updating that that information. They are going to begin to not only share information, in terms of, charts and spreadsheets, but also give us, a social media presence to push out, the great work that the district has been able to do as a result of the ESSER funding. A couple of things that I want to call out today. We have landed on a timeline for additional decision making. So the cabinet has begun the conversation around the positions that currently are funded on ESSER. And we are using a matrix that I'll share in just a moment. That board member Cole gets exactly at your question of what is the investment in what is the cost per student to help the district and the entire community wrestle with those questions of if you cannot keep everything that is in your plan, how do you, with a lens towards keeping our student needs at the focus, look at investments in terms of their cost per student. So
Is there an equity variable to that?
there most certainly will be an equity variable there. That is currently planned to be called out in that risk category. In other words, the school counselors, for example, if we went back to a shared model where we did not have a school counselor in every school, what would the impact be? And are there some schools that might be able to share a position? And are there other schools that need 2 or more school counselors? So yes, we will be considering the needs of individual schools in addition to the needs of groups of students. But the timeline, we are working to have information to share again by my next update, which would be due in March, as to the plan for the disposition of positions that are currently funded on us. In addition to that, we have programs and other strategies that are currently funded using ESSER funds. And so you need information about those as well. Certainly the positions, but also a number of the items that I shared with you just a moment ago. Chromebooks, training, development, professional development. Currently, we are funding the majority of that work using our ESSER dollars. And so by June, we will have a plan with priorities identified for what we expect to be able to continue. Perhaps shift to a different funding source. But all of these conversations are happening in collaboration with the treasurer's office to ensure that on the academic and programming side, that we are not making decisions outside of the lens of the treasurer's office. We're excited about the opportunity to launch a process to look at investment based on a matrix. And we intend to use this type of decision-making, not just around our ESSER positions, but other positions that we currently have or are looking to have in the future. So we do have about $200 million remaining in our third pot of ESSER. And these are the major investments that I expect we will support. Capital improvements. This is really a once in a lifetime opportunity to have federal fund support to address capital improvement needs. Now, you want to click on the guidance document and read all the details because there are details. But in general, we will certainly be addressing HVAC. There are additional roof projects. Certainly, if the building is leaking and water is collecting, that causes an issue not only in terms of wear and tear on the building, but health and safety as well. And then we'll be addressing classroom environments to the extent that we possibly can. That may look like furniture that is updated to be flexible and support SEL and PBIS strategies, maybe other types of lighting, technology improvements to address classroom environments. We have found over the last couple of years, and you certainly get updates about this, that there are some high needs licensure areas where this is not a Columbus City School issue. This is a educational workforce issue across the country and around the world. And so we are investing some ESSER funds to support tuition. We have about 80 general education teachers who are in coursework right now to add a special education license to so that they will be able to serve students with disabilities. We are also investing in tuition for teachers to add an ESL endorsement, adapted phys ed, gifted and talented. Those are a few of the areas that we have vacancies. And we know that our own teachers have the best relationships with the students in our schools. And so to the extent that teachers are interested in adding an additional license, we're supporting that. We've partnered with the Ohio Department of Education to help support best practices in identifying universities to help us with
Okay.
that.
So for Joe and Jane Public, this is our capacity building effort.
It is absolutely an investment in capacity building.
This is something that is helping us expand our reach in meeting the needs of students who may fall into a category of English second language learners, spec ed, gifted and talented, which is a part of spec ed. So
Yes,
this is our capacity building.
absolutely.
Awesome.
Yes. We are continuing to find that the traditional school day is not enough for all students. And so we are providing high dose tutoring, whether that occurs in the summer or outside of the school day, supporting that those programs. I talked a little bit about investing in professional development of our staff across the board. And then salary and benefits for staff, including recruitment and retention costs. So as we look at that dollar figure, sometimes people have the question, is the district going to leave money sitting on the table? My answer to that again today, as I said a quarter ago, is no. In fact, I am expecting that we have impact reports that will help anyone who is listening to understand that there is significant work that the district will not be able to continue after ESSER if we don't have additional investment. And I speak directly to Title I as my call out for that. And I'd be happy to take questions.
Are there any questions? All right. Yes, sir.
So Catherine, through all these quarterly reports, has described our progress in spending the funds. ESSER one we spent in its entirety, well on our way with ESSER two and correspondingly ESSER three. I want to look back at least a year, maybe a little bit longer when all this money started to flow. And the comments about the speed with which at least the Ohio school districts are spending their money. And some looked at reports at the ODE website showing that the percentage spent was very low. And we also, well, that's because A, it's very early. We've got a couple of years to spend the money, and B, we have to plan it because we have all these restrictions on how we can spend the dollars. And as time went by and some of the general fund expenditures were picked up by ESSER, we see the general fund balance go up. So we were getting criticized on two fronts. One, you're not spending your federal dollars, and two, look at all the money you have in your forecast. And so in the last quarter of this year, you can see now we are spending the federal dollars. And some, I'll call perfect storm parameters, as I described in the 5-year forecast, come to fruition. And now our cash balance of, $300 or $400 million has declined. So the point being is the comments made several years ago were inappropriately myopic. There's a sound bite for you. PR people will love that, I think.
Oh, no, good.
And it's just, we were saying that way back then and being criticized for having cash, and that's it's just myopic. And so here we are, we're doing fine. We've got a plan for a general fund and a 5-year forecast addressing that. We're working on this. We worked the plan, and I just think that you wait a little bit, and what we are predicting and what we're planning, it does come true. So I just think it's important to note that the criticism, I think, was very, very unfounded.
I thank you for that. I just have a quick question. It's relative to how we're keeping track on a per student basis or per item basis of how we're utilizing these ESSER dollars. I know that other school districts, and it's kind of alluded to today on a call that we're on every Wednesday with Georgetown University and our training dinner, that certain school districts don't have the capacity to be able to look back from an audit perspective and really isolate where those dollars were actually directed, how they impacted the students. Where are we in that process? How we address that systemically with our situation here at CCS?
Thank you. So from the very beginning, probably 30 days after we learned that the district would begin to receive ESSER dollars, we created an internal tracking process. So every activity tied to an approved area of focus has a complete application. The administrator within the district, who is the process owner for that work, completes that application. It is reviewed for allowability. It is reviewed again at the budget level. And then after the project begins, at 6-month intervals, an impact report is tied back to each individual strategy. So we have a process. In fact, we were recognized about a year ago as having an impact report process already in place. So we will not be in the situation where we are going back 2 years later trying to find information. We literally planned for the end from the beginning.
Awesome, shocker, happy. Okay.
So some of those photos that you saw and the narrative around the strategy and the newsletters that are coming out, certainly the information that is on the district website, all ties back to information collected during that impact reporting
Okay, thank you,
process.
thank you. All right, provided there's nothing else, we'll move right on ahead to fiscal year twenty.
If I could simply commend Catherine on a really well done report.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eric. All right, we'll move on to fiscal year 2023 budget request.
Sure, thank you, Chair Cole. Before the committee, I'd like to share that there's 2 requests that will be coming to the full board next week. And these are to increase their general fund appropriation level. The first one is through the Office of English as a Second Language. In this request, they're increasing their translators, getting their budget increased for the Ohio State test that is coming up. And that's a partnership with the Ohio Department of Education. So that request, they're asking for additional funds there. Or appropriation, I'm sorry. And then for the second appropriation increase, is for the unexpected hiring of an independent legal firm for the superintendent search. So that is a new request for additional appropriation dollars for that. So these 2 will be presented to the board next.
I thank you for that. And I will highlight that second expenditure with the search is really up to, right?
That
It's
is
an up
correct.
to amount.
That is-
So I just wanted to allude to that, but thank you very much.
You're welcome.
All right, moving on, we will do FAC meeting dates for year 2023.
So, the final agenda item is a listing of our dates, proposed dates. They fall, say for one of them, they all fall in between the first and second board meeting of each month. It's typically the second week, the second Wednesday of the month, but you know how the calendar works. Sometimes that gets pushed back to the third Wednesday. I highlight April 19th because that's 1 week off. It's 1 week later. Because the week before that, which would be April 12th, is right in the middle of the district spring break. And some folks choose to take that entire week off and aren't around. So in consultation with Chair Cole, I suggested moving it a week. The 2 of us thought it was a good idea. So it's listed here as April 19th and I highlighted. So for those of you who schedule these meetings in your calendar and use the repetitive feature, and it says, do you want to put this on every second Wednesday of the month, you're gonna have to fix this one because it won't fall into that pattern. Other than that, unless there's any other issues, those are the meetings we'll put on the calendar. Those are the meetings that we'll take to the board to be publicly announced. And you'll all be receiving meeting invites in January from me. So that's it for the calendar, unless there's questions.
There are none. I thank you for that. Eric doesn't look like he has any, so awesome.
Nothing from me.
All right, we're good to go. All right, so if there is a motion to adjourn.
There can't be.
That's right.
Bye.
All right, we're back. We're gonna call this meeting closed. Be well all. Happy holidays.
Thank you. Happy